Mr. President, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak on all of these issues that we are facing.
Especially when it comes to the global economy, to the Philippine economy, right? The global inflationary picture right now getting worse, prices also across the Philippines rising. What is your government doing to mitigate this?
Well, certainly we have decided, actually, given the choice between defending foreign exchange and trying to remedy the situation of rising interest rates, rising inflation. This is something that we have tried to control, of course, with the usual mechanisms of moving the interest rate.
Tell us a little bit about how the Forex markets are doing right now. In your view, what is the appropriate level for the Philippine peso?
That's very hard to say for the simple reason that we really have not had this situation before. So it's not, there is no formula that will says the range should be here to there. It really is a reflection, in my view, is a reflection more on the strength of the dollar. And we must remember that the dollar always does well in times of uncertainty. It's a safe haven, it's considered a safe haven currency. But so far, as I said, we have chosen to pay attention to the inflation rate, and I think we have managed to. We are the last month we are still running at around 4.7% through the year. It has increased a little bit, so we have raised interest rates a little bit as well. We have already we have raised it at 75 basis points twice already. Trying because the Fed has been very, very aggressive in terms of raising their rates
You started to slow down, though. Governor Medalla was telling us yesterday 50 basis points as well, right? So what do you make of that amount of hikes from now on?
The high amount
50 basis points.
Yes, because really inflation is something that we have to deal with. It has gone in terms of basic commodities, agricultural commodities, general costs to everyday requirements of ordinary people, and we cannot allow it to reach to an extent where people simply cannot buy their food or simply cannot pay their electricity or the water or all these basic things. So those are the levels that we can see. We are watching very, very closely. It never gets to that point. Although, you know, we would like to have more control over it, but we are chasing that number.
Especially fuel prices are continuing to rise. How is that impacting you?
Significantly, because the fuel prices actually, strangely enough, well, I think it impacts us in the same way that it impacts all the other countries. And fuel, as we well know, is such a basic commodity that everything follows fuel, and to the point that even our agricultural commodities, fertilizers, inputs have increased. Transport costs have gone up. And I've been asking our friends in the shipping industry, and they said there are no longer any charters for fuel shipments coming out of Russia, and so that again is going to. So what we are hoping to do is to go back and sort of diversify. The tendency is you get complacent and you depend on a single source. So now we will look to what we describe as non-traditional suppliers of fuel. So we have certainly depended on Dubai. We watched the Dubai oil prices, but now maybe we need to approach Russia and say that maybe they can loosen up and provide us with some fuel.
Are you having those conversations with
Russia?
Yes,
we are. We are having conversations with as many possible suppliers or potential suppliers.
When could we see those supplies first?
Pretty soon. We're coming close to some agreements, and certainly it won't be. It will not be only in one place. And again, the diversification of supply lines in terms of not only fuel, for that matter, for all kinds
Do the
of other
sanctions
imports.
against Russia, given the invasion of Ukraine, worry you?
Yes, well, we can see, because we can see the effects, and in our terms, the political side of it has been, of course, a little tricky, but nonetheless, the national interest comes first, and so we have to find those new sources of fuel. Yeah, but that applies not only to fuel. It applies to things like feed. It applies to things like fertilizer. It applies to things like all these other inputs that are just critical for us.
On the fuel side, nuclear plants, does restarting Bataan plant factor in?
Well, the thing is, in terms of our energy supply, vis-a-vis the demand, we are a long way off, and so without any of these crises, we already have had to be very judicious in our planning. As you well know, the large power plants take 6, 7, 8 years, if you're lucky, to get, especially nuclear plants. Even the new technology that is being spoken about, the modular, the small-scale modular.
Given
nuclear
how
power.
difficult it is to start them with the Bataan plant count.
The Bataan power plant, I don't know. It's very much in the gray zone. It's right at the cusp here. In that, is it still worth it to the fuel has been sold. We'll have to start very much from scratch. We're paying for it still, and it's never been online. It's never gone online. It's meant to go online in '86, but now we're looking perhaps. And he said, "Because what do you need? What are the most attractive sources of power generation, and that you would like to have in the future?" We need everything. We need all that we can get. So, the nuclear power plants we have been talking, but again, they haven't been rolled out yet on a commercial basis.
Would that also include a potential joint exploration of oil with China for longer-term solutions to this?
Well, yes,
Because those conversations were halted, right?
All up. Well, they were halted for the simple reason that we could not come to an agreement as to what local law will apply.
Would you like to restart them?
That's derivative that derives from the fact that there is a disagreement on the actual territory or the maritime area, the areas of the sea where that we consider to be Philippine, within the Philippine baselines, within the economic zones. Therefore, local law is Philippine law. The Chinese have a very different view, and they claim that this is their territory, and therefore their local law should apply. That's really, and it became a constitutional question. It would have been violative of our constitution if we were to agree to the Chinese assertion that their local law should apply.
Are there any points for compromise?
Yes, I believe there must be. We have to continue. I must say, well, we certainly have said that on this basis we cannot continue, but we continue to explore. Perhaps there can be other ways that we can do it. There have been examples around the region where they have similar differing views, let's just say, on the exclusive economic zones and the baselines, where they have managed to find a way to have joint explorations with the Chinese, with the Americans, etc. So, but in our case, it's not oil, it's gas. And because we feel that, as I said, the subject now of the mix between renewables and traditional comes into play. And so we would like very much for us to move, as we all do, to move more towards renewables. And perhaps the interim fuel that would be good for the Philippines would be natural gas. There are several prospective sources. I don't know if you're familiar with the Malampaya fields out in the West Philippine Sea, which have been providing us with a supply of gas, and we are continuing to to negotiate those not the exploration, it's already the exploitation. The reserves already have been established, and there are some new fields that we feel are also something that will help us in that very critical situation of fuel supply.
You recently had a conversation with President Biden where you received that ironclad commitment for the defense of the Philippines. Tell us a little bit about this relationship with the U.S., especially when it comes to perhaps more military bases for U.S. use in the Philippines.
Well, the question of military bases, American or otherwise, has been decided because in our Constitution we're simply not allowed to have foreign military bases in the Philippines. However, given that, there are still many arrangements that we can make in terms of our joint military and defense and security responses to all these shocks that we are seeing and having to go through. So again, in the Philippines, for the Philippines and the United States, it's a very singular situation. We have had 100+ years relationship. Our formal relationship is in 70 years, but even beyond that, we already had the relationship with the United States, and that's what we hope to build on. We continue to
and that
build.
includes more usage of bases for the U.S.
No, we can't have bases. We can't have
the
bases.
usage and other agreements that you
Well,
just
we have the
talked
Visiting Forces Agreement, which allows forces to come on a rotational basis, not a permanent base. We also have a mutual defense treaty with the United States. The United States are our only treaty partners when it comes to that, and so that has to evolve, and that is what we spoke about with President Biden. And I said, what we started off with maybe 70 years ago, the situation is entirely different now, and therefore we have to evolve that. So the relationship between the United States and the Philippines will just continue to grow. That partnership will not diminish in any way whatsoever. And I think in the future, it will probably just go from strength to strength.
But the Philippines, as many other countries, is in a trickier position, right? Given the rivalry between the U.S. and China. If there are more tensions around Taiwan, what role would the Philippines play?
Well, essentially the role that the Philippines is envisioning for ourselves is just the defense of the Philippines. But it's clear to us that if there is actual outright conflict, and a shooting war begins, there is no way that we are exempt from that, whatever we do. Kaohsiung is 40 minutes away by flight from the northern Philippines. The nearest part of China to the Philippines is 600 kilometers. So it's not something that we can possibly avoid. And so, of course, the defense of the country is is going to be the first priority. But again, we cannot act independently in the sense that the Philippines is not militarily sufficiently capable to fight a war by themselves, or even for the defense of the country. Therefore, we are putting much of our efforts into the partnerships that we have with our allies, with our partners. ASEAN is going to have a very large part to play in this. I really believe that ASEAN should be the main actor when it comes to the defense and security around the region. Of course, there are multilateral. That's one of the best examples of a multilateral arrangement. But bilateral arrangements with other countries also are available, and that certainly applies to the United States, where we have very strong bilateral relations, and we can use that as a basis for moving forward. But you cannot look at the security situation and isolate it to defense and security. The economies around the West Philippine Sea and the Asia Pacific region, the strength of the economies play a large part. And I've used the term economic security as a basis also for the security of our of our different member nations and our different allies. And I always say that the main pillar of our foreign policy is peace. We talked about the economy, and we all know that that is top of mind and that is critical right now. And we have many plans and we have many ideas that we have started to put into place. But without peace, they will not be they will not come to fruition.
Mr. President, finally, very recently, the Philippines marked 50 years since your father declared martial law, and your campaign has also been blamed for historical revisionism. How do you plan to move forward?
I think we have moved forward. I think perhaps that political question is being raised by our political opponents, but the political cycle we have gone through during the last campaign and the last election has really given us the direction of where people want us to take the government, where the people want us to take the Philippines, and that is to economic prosperity. And that's why we have focused on that. As a matter of fact, if you look at the campaign, I did not engage on that basis. I simply engaged people on the basis that this is what we want to do for you. And at this critical juncture in our economic history, that is the most important thing. And to go back to the political aspect of it, the best politics is still performance. And that's how you move forward. You perform well, and make the people do the things that you need to do so that people feel that there is an improvement in their lives. And that's the most important thing.
How about plans to execute the estate tax ruling involving your family?
Well, we're still, the problem with that is that it's very simple, is that we were not allowed to argue that because we were in exile. So we would like to go back and say that let's see because what really has happened is that that number that is being bandied about includes all kinds of properties that certainly we have never claimed. In fact, we have signed many quitclaims on those properties, but nonetheless, they are assessed against the estate. So there isn't the assessment rather is not based on the estate value of the estate simply because the estate has not been probated. The estate is under the control of the government. So we have yet to define what the estate actually is so that we are able to come to a proper assessment. And that is the issue that we would like to argue now before the courts.
Mr. President, we're running out of time, I'm being told, but let me just ask you one final question. Given that investors are watching the Philippines right now, a lot of the uncertainty about the Philippines, even with the previous administration, has come from uncertainty and questions about the rule of law. What can you tell the global markets right now? What's your message?
Well, the rule of law is always paramount. I mean, we have always said that we are people, we are a nation of laws rather than politics or people. And I think that if we look much closer at some of the issues that have been raised, we will find that the Philippines and the government has hewed very closely to the strictures of what the law allows and does not allow.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your interest in the Philippines.